What if I told you that a single message from one man could shut down 20% of the world's oil supply, open new fronts across the Middle East, and force the United States to choose between withdrawal and war? What if that message was not a whisper behind closed doors, but a public declaration broadcast to the world? What if the man who sent it was not a general, not a diplomat, but the newly appointed supreme leader of Iran speaking for the first time to the United States? Right now, in the early hours of March 2026, that scenario is not hypothetical. It is reality. The corridors of power in Washington, Tehran, and Brussels are buzzing with the implications of a statement that has shifted the geopolitical landscape overnight. Welcome to Power Clash Report. Today, we are breaking down one of the most significant geopolitical developments in recent history. We are moving beyond the viral headlines to examine what Iran's new supreme leader actually said, what his message means for the ongoing conflict, and what it signals for the future of U.S.-Iran relations. We will analyze the four key points of his address: the threat to the Strait of Hormuz, the possibility of new fronts, the demand for compensation, and the call to expel U.S. bases from the region. We will assess the credibility of these threats, the strategic logic behind them, and the potential consequences for global security. And we will answer the question that matters most. Is this a bluff designed to extract concessions or a genuine escalation that could reshape the Middle East? Stay with me until the end, because understanding this message is not just about geopolitics. It is about the stability of the global economy, the safety of millions of civilians, and the fragile mechanisms that prevent regional conflicts from becoming global crises. Let us begin with the facts. On March 12, 2026, Iran's newly appointed supreme leader issued his first formal message addressed to the United States government and people. The statement, released through official Iranian state media and the Office of the Supreme Leader, outlined four core demands and warnings that mark a significant shift in Tehran's rhetorical and strategic posture. This transition of power itself is significant. In the Islamic Republic, the supreme leader holds ultimate authority over the military, the judiciary, and state media. When he speaks, it is not merely an opinion, it is state doctrine. His first message sets the tone for his entire tenure. By choosing to address the United States directly and aggressively in this inaugural statement, he is signaling that continuity of resistance is the priority, not reconciliation. The first point declared that the leverage of blocking the Strait of Hormuz must definitely continue to be used. This narrow waterway, only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, is arguably the world's most critical oil choke point. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, approximately 21 million barrels of oil per day pass through this strait. That is roughly 20% of global petroleum consumption. It is also a key route for liquefied natural gas, with Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter, relying almost entirely on this passage for its shipments. When the supreme leader states that the leverage of blocking the strait must continue to be used, he is invoking a capability that Iran has demonstrated in the past. Iranian naval forces have conducted exercises simulating mine-laying, fast-attack craft swarms, and anti-ship missile launches in these waters. The threat is credible not because Iran could permanently seal the strait, but because even a temporary disruption would send shockwaves through global energy markets. To understand the mechanics of this threat, we must look at Iran's asymmetric naval strategy. They do not need to sink every tanker to cause panic. They only need to make the insurance premium so high that shipping companies refuse to transit. They possess thousands of naval mines, capable of being laid quietly by small boats or submarines. They possess anti-ship cruise missiles hidden in coastal caves, capable of striking vessels without warning. And they possess swarm boats, fast vessels designed to overwhelm a warship's defense systems through sheer numbers. If the supreme leader orders even a partial closure, the immediate effect would be a spike in Brent crude prices, potentially exceeding $150 per barrel within days. This is not speculation. It is a projection based on historical precedents from the tanker war of the 1980s and recent Houthi disruptions in the Red Sea. The leverage is not just military, it is economic warfare. But capability is not the same as intent. Would Iran actually block the Strait of Hormuz? The answer depends on escalation dynamics. If the U.S.-Israeli campaign intensifies, targeting critical infrastructure or leadership figures, Tehran may calculate that the costs of inaction outweigh the risks of retaliation. Blocking the strait would be a dramatic move, inviting a military response from the U.S. Fifth Fleet and potentially drawing in regional allies. However, it would also achieve immediate strategic effects, spiking oil prices, straining Western economies, and demonstrating Iran's ability to impose costs far beyond its borders. This is the logic of asymmetric deterrence, using a disproportionate threat to offset conventional weakness. It forces the adversary to consider not just the battlefield, but the gas pump and the stock market. Let us address the second point, the possibility of opening new fronts. This warning suggests that Iran is prepared to expand the conflict geographically if the current war situation continues. What might these new fronts look like? They could include intensified attacks by proxy groups, Hezbollah in Lebanon launching rockets into northern Israel, Shia militias in Iraq targeting U.S. bases, Houthi forces in Yemen disrupting Red Sea shipping, or cyber operations against critical infrastructure in the U.S. or Europe. Alternatively, Iran could directly target U.S. or allied assets in the region, naval vessels in the Persian Gulf, diplomatic facilities, or commercial interests. The phrase new fronts implies coordination, escalation, and a shift from defensive to offensive posture. This is not a vague threat. It is a roadmap for asymmetric warfare. Consider the specific capabilities of these proxies. Hezbollah possesses an estimated 150,000 rockets and missiles, some capable of reaching deep into Israeli territory. Iraqi militias have demonstrated the ability to strike U.S. bases with drones and indirect fire. The Houthis have proven they can disrupt global trade lanes thousands of miles from Yemen. If these groups coordinate their attacks simultaneously, it creates a saturation effect. Defense systems like Iron Dome or Patriot batteries have limits on how many threats they can engage at once. By opening multiple fronts, Iran stretches these defenses thin. It forces the United States and its allies to defend everywhere at once, increasing the likelihood that something gets through. This is the essence of networked warfare, decentralized execution with centralized strategic intent. Now let us examine the third point, the demand for compensation. The Supreme Leader's ultimatum, pay compensation or we take from your property or we destroy your property, frames the conflict in transactional terms. This is significant. It suggests that Iran views the current hostilities not as an existential struggle, but as a negotiable dispute with material costs. By articulating specific demands, Tehran creates a potential off-ramp. If the U.S. and Israel agree to compensation for damages, escalation could be halted. However, the alternative, seizing or destroying enemy property, raises the stakes dramatically. What constitutes property? Military assets, commercial infrastructure, financial reserves held abroad? The ambiguity is intentional. It keeps adversaries guessing and maximizes psychological pressure. This demand touches on complex legal and financial frameworks. Iran has billions of dollars in assets frozen in banks across South Korea, Europe, and the United States due to sanctions. Historically, Tehran has sought access to these funds as part of negotiations. The threat to take from their property could imply cyber theft, seizure of commercial vessels, or legal maneuvers to claim sovereign assets. The threat to destroy their property is more ominous, suggesting kinetic strikes on infrastructure. This dual-track approach, financial and physical, gives Iran flexibility. They can escalate gradually, starting with legal claims or cyber operations before moving to physical destruction. It allows them to test red lines without immediately triggering all-out war. This is coercive diplomacy at its most granular level. Let us address the fourth point, the call to expel U.S. bases from the region. This recommendation to regional countries is both a diplomatic maneuver and a strategic objective. The United States maintains a significant military presence across the Middle East, in Bahrain, 5th Fleet Headquarters, Qatar, Al Udeid Air Base, Kuwait, the UAE, and Iraq. These bases enable power projection, intelligence gathering, and rapid response capabilities. By urging regional governments to shut them down, Iran seeks to undermine U.S. influence, strengthen its own position, and rally anti-American sentiment. This is not a new goal. Since the 1979 revolution, expelling U.S. forces from the Middle East has been a cornerstone of Iranian foreign policy. What is new is the public urgent framing, as soon as possible. This signals impatience and a willingness to act unilaterally if regional partners hesitate. The strategic implication of losing these bases would be profound for the United States. It would increase response times to crises in the region. It would reduce intelligence coverage of Iranian activities. It would signal a retreat of American power to allies who depend on U.S. security guarantees. For Gulf Arab states, this puts them in a difficult position. They host U.S. forces for protection against Iran, but they also trade with Iran and seek to avoid becoming battlegrounds. If they refuse Iran's call, they risk becoming targets. If they accept, they risk losing U.S. protection. This dilemma is exactly what Iran seeks to exploit. By forcing regional states to choose sides, Tehran hopes to fracture the coalition that supports the U.S. presence. It is a political attack designed to achieve strategic gains without firing a shot. Now, let us talk about the human dimension. Behind every strategic declaration are real people whose lives are affected by war and peace. In Iran, civilians face the threat of airstrikes, economic hardship, and uncertainty. In the United States, families of service members worry about escalation. In the region, refugees, displaced persons, and vulnerable communities depend on stability for survival. The Supreme Leader's message, while framed in geopolitical terms, has profound human consequences. A blockade of the Strait of Hormuz could spike fuel prices worldwide, affecting household budgets from Mumbai to Munich. New fronts could displace thousands more. Demands for compensation could divert resources from humanitarian needs. This is why responsible analysis matters. We must understand the strategy without losing sight of the stakes. There is also the information warfare dimension. In the digital age, narratives are weapons. The Supreme Leader's message is designed not just to communicate policy, but to shape perception. By issuing a public ultimatum, he signals resolve to domestic audiences, deters adversaries through ambiguity, and positions Iran as a defender of regional sovereignty against foreign intervention. For the United States, the challenge is to respond in a way that maintains deterrence without escalating unnecessarily. For regional allies, the challenge is to balance security partnerships with domestic political pressures. For the international community, the challenge is to prevent miscalculation while pursuing diplomatic solutions. The battle for public opinion is as critical as the battle for territory. Now let us consider the global implications. The Strait of Hormuz is a linchpin of global energy security. Any sustained disruption would force oil-importing nations to tap strategic reserves, seek alternative suppliers, or accelerate transitions to renewable energy. It could also reshape alliance structures as countries reassess their dependencies and partnerships. The threat of new fronts could draw in multiple actors, creating a complex web of conflicts that is difficult to contain. The demand for compensation introduces a novel element into great power competition: the monetization of conflict damages. And the call to expel U.S. bases challenges the post-Cold War security architecture of the Middle East. These are not isolated issues. They are interconnected dynamics that could redefine regional and global order. What about the U.S. response? The White House has not yet issued a formal statement addressing the Supreme Leader's message specifically. However, recent briefings from the Pentagon and State Department emphasize three principles: deterrence, diplomacy, and defense of allies. The United States will continue to protect freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz through naval presence and coalition partners. It will pursue diplomatic channels, including through intermediaries like Oman and Qatar, to de-escalate tensions, and it will defend U.S. personnel and interests against any attack. This balanced approach aims to avoid overreaction while making clear that threats will not be ignored. However, the ambiguity of Iran's demands, what constitutes compensation, what property is at risk, creates challenges for crafting a precise response. Inside the U.S. administration, there is likely a debate between hawks and diplomats. Hawks argue that any concession rewards aggression and invites further demands. They advocate for increased sanctions, enhanced military posture, and explicit threats of regime change if red lines are crossed. Diplomats argue that pressure alone has failed to change Iranian behavior, and that engagement, even indirect, is necessary to prevent war. They advocate for back-channel communications, confidence-building measures, and potential prisoner swaps as a starting point. This internal division can lead to mixed signals which adversaries may exploit. Clarity in U.S. strategy is essential to prevent miscalculation. If Iran perceives weakness, it may escalate. If they perceive imminent attack, they may strike first. Finding the middle path is the core challenge of statecraft. Let us examine the regional dimension again. Iran's call to expel U.S. bases puts pressure on Gulf Arab states, which host American forces but also maintain economic ties with Tehran. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar must balance security cooperation with the U.S. against the risk of Iranian retaliation. Some may privately welcome a reduced U.S. footprint, others may fear the vacuum it could create. This divergence complicates coalition building and creates opportunities for Iran to exploit divisions. Moreover, the threat of new fronts could activate proxy networks across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, testing the resilience of multiple governments simultaneously. This is the essence of hybrid warfare, using multiple interconnected pressure points to overwhelm adversaries. The region is a powder keg, and this message has added more gunpowder. So what happens next? There are several possible scenarios. In the most optimistic scenario, the Supreme Leader's message opens a channel for negotiation, with third-party mediators facilitating talks on compensation, de-escalation, and confidence-building measures. In a more pessimistic scenario, the ultimatum is rejected, leading to Iranian actions to block the Strait of Hormuz or activate proxy attacks, triggering a military response and rapid escalation. In a middle path, both sides engage in calibrated signaling, Iran demonstrating capabilities without crossing red lines, the U.S. reinforcing deterrence without provoking conflict, creating a tense but managed standoff. The outcome depends on choices made in Tehran, Washington, and regional capitals in the coming days and weeks. What can you do as an informed citizen? First, stay informed through credible sources. Follow official statements from governments and international organizations. Be skeptical of sensational claims on social media. Second, understand the broader context. This is not an isolated declaration. It is part of a shifting landscape of global power where regional conflicts have worldwide consequences. Third, engage constructively, share verified information, support diplomatic efforts for a peaceful resolution, advocate for policies that prioritize stability over posturing. At Power Clash Report, we believe that knowledge is power. Understanding geopolitical events helps us make better decisions, protect our families, and contribute to a more stable world. We are committed to providing analysis that is thorough, balanced, and grounded in facts. We will continue to monitor this developing situation and bring you updates as verified information emerges. Before we conclude, let us recap the key points. Iran's new supreme leader has issued his first message to the United States, outlining 4 core demands: continue leveraging the Strait of Hormuz, prepare to open new fronts if conflict continues, demand compensation or face property seizure destruction, and urge regional countries to expel U.S. bases. These statements represent a significant escalation in rhetorical posture and strategic signaling. The credibility of these threats varies. The Strait of Hormuz threat is operationally feasible. New fronts depend on proxy coordination. Compensation demands introduce novel diplomatic dynamics, and the call to expel bases challenges regional alliances. The global implications include energy security, alliance structures, and the risk of miscalculation. The path forward requires vigilance, communication, and a commitment to diplomatic solutions. The choice before the world's leaders is stark. They can allow fear and rhetoric to drive policy, risking a spiral of escalation. Or they can rely on intelligence, preparation, and strategic patience to manage threats without surrendering to panic. History will judge this moment not by the words that are spoken, but by the wisdom with which they are answered. As citizens of an interconnected world, we have both the right and the responsibility to demand that our leaders choose clarity over chaos, evidence over emotion, and hope over fear. The stability of the global economy, the safety of millions of civilians, and the future of international order depend on the choices made in the coming days. We must remain watchful, remain informed, and remain committed to peace. If this analysis provided value, please like this video, subscribe to Power Clash Report, and share it with someone who needs to understand these developments. Turn on notifications so you do not miss our updates as this story evolves. In the description below, you will find links to credible sources, official statements, and further reading on this topic. We are committed to bringing you signal in a world of noise. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay safe. And remember, in a world of increasing uncertainty, clarity is the most valuable asset we have.